The black Mercedes sedan pulled into the massive parking lot of Henderson Luxury Motors just after 2 in the afternoon. Behind the wheel sat David Chen, a 42-year-old businessman who had just spent the entire morning at his lawyer's office signing stack after stack of papers. His father had passed away 3 months ago, and today was the day everything became official. He was now the owner of the very dealership he was looking at through his windshield. David turned off the engine and sat there for a moment, staring at the building. The glass showroom sparkled in the sunlight, and he could see expensive cars lined up inside like jewels in a display case. His father had built this place from absolutely nothing, starting with a tiny used car lot 30 years ago. Now it was one of the most successful luxury dealerships in the entire state. But David hadn't come here to announce himself as the new boss. Not yet. He wanted to see how things really worked when nobody knew who he was. He wanted to walk around, watch the staff, see how they treated regular customers. His father had always told him that the true character of a business shows when nobody important is watching. David stepped out of his car wearing jeans, sneakers, and a plain gray jacket. He'd just come off a 6-hour flight from Seattle, and he looked exactly like what he was. A tired traveler who hadn't bothered to change clothes. His hair was a bit messy, and he had 2 days of stubble on his face. He definitely didn't look like someone who could afford the $250,000 cars sitting in that showroom. The moment he walked through the glass doors, David felt the cool air conditioning and heard soft jazz music playing in the background. The floor was so polished he could see his reflection in it. About a dozen cars were spread throughout the space, each one positioned perfectly under designer lighting. A few salespeople stood in clusters, chatting and laughing. A couple of them glanced his way, but nobody moved to greet him. David walked slowly toward a stunning red sports car in the center of the showroom. The price tag on the window made him whistle quietly. $280,000. He bent down to look at the interior, admiring the leather seats and the high-tech dashboard. His father would have loved this car. "Can I help you?" The voice behind him was cold, almost challenging. David straightened up and turned around. A man in his early 50s stood there with his arms crossed. He wore an expensive suit, had perfectly styled gray hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. His name tag read, Derek Connolly, Senior Sales Consultant. "Just looking," David said pleasantly. Beautiful car. Derek's eyes traveled from David's worn sneakers up to his wrinkled jacket, taking in every detail. That particular model starts at $280,000. Plus tax and dealer fees, of course. He said it in a way that clearly meant way out of your price range, buddy. David nodded, unfazed. "I figured it would be in that range." "What kind of engine does it have?" The question seemed to annoy Derek. "It's a V8 twin-turbo. Look, maybe you'd be more interested in something a bit more practical. We have a partner dealership about 15 minutes from here that handles more budget-friendly options." "I'm actually very interested in this one," David said, keeping his voice calm. "How does it handle on the highway? And what's the 0 to 60 time?" Derek let out an impatient breath. 3.2 seconds. "But honestly, I don't think this is the right fit for you. These vehicles require specific insurance coverage, maintenance plans. They're really designed for a certain type of buyer." David felt his jaw tighten, but he maintained his composure. He'd experienced this kind of treatment before in his life, though not often these days. "I understand all that. I'm seriously interested. Could I possibly take it for a test drive?" Derek actually laughed. It wasn't a friendly laugh. "A test drive? No, I'm sorry. We can't just let anyone take our premium inventory out on the road. We have policies about that." David reached into his pocket and pulled out his business card. It identified him as an automotive consultant based in Seattle. "I assure you I'm a serious buyer. I work in the industry." Derek took the card, glanced at it for maybe 2 seconds, then tossed it onto a nearby desk like it was a piece of junk mail. "Look, sir, I've been doing this for 15 years. I can tell when someone is serious and when someone is just browsing. And right now you're taking up time I could be spending with actual customers." David looked around the showroom. There were no other customers. The other salespeople had stopped their conversations and were watching now, some looking uncomfortable, others just curious. Not a single one stepped forward to intervene or offer help. "So you're refusing to help me?" David asked quietly. "I'm suggesting you visit a dealership more suited to your needs," Derek said firmly. Then he gestured toward a security guard standing near the entrance. "Actually, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. You're disrupting our business." David felt a familiar anger rising in his chest, but he pushed it down. He'd learned long ago that losing his temper in situations like this never helped. Instead, he let his eyes travel slowly around the showroom one more time. He noted which employees were watching with obvious discomfort and which ones had simply turned away, pretending not to notice. He looked up at the large portrait hanging on the back wall. His father, James Chen, smiling in the photo taken at the dealership's 20th anniversary. The security guard had started walking toward him now. "Radio in hand, I understand," David said, his voice steady. "I'll leave. But I want you to know something. I'll remember this moment. I'll remember exactly how you treated me today." Derek smirked. "I'm sure you will. Have a good day, sir." As David walked toward the exit, escorted by the security guard like some kind of criminal, he took one last look back. Derek had already returned to his colleagues, probably preparing to tell them a funny story about the guy who came in wearing jeans and thought he could afford a $300,000 car. David stepped out into the afternoon heat and walked slowly back to his car. Tomorrow morning was going to be very interesting. Tomorrow morning, everyone in that showroom was going to learn exactly who he was, and then the real work would begin. The email hit everyone's inbox at 8 in the morning. Mandatory staff meeting at 9. No exceptions. All sales staff, managers, and support team must attend. It was signed by Patricia Wells, the general manager who had been running Henderson Luxury Motors for the past 20 years. In the break room, the speculation started immediately. Tom, one of the younger salespeople, nervously stirred his coffee. "You think they're laying people off? I heard luxury car sales have been down this quarter." Derek walked in looking as confident as ever in his navy blue suit. "Relax, kid. Sales are fine. Probably just another boring policy update or some new training program they want us to sit through." He grabbed a donut from the box on the counter. "I sold 3 cars last week. They're not getting rid of their top performer." By 8:45, the conference room was packed. Everyone sat in the cushioned chairs around the long table, whispering theories and checking their phones. Patricia walked in at exactly 9 o'clock and the room went quiet. But she wasn't alone. Behind her was the dealership's attorney, Mr. Howard, carrying a briefcase. And next to him was a younger man in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, crisp white shirt, and a silk tie that probably cost more than most people's car payments. Several people gasped. Jennifer, who worked in financing, grabbed Tom's arm. "That's the guy from yesterday," she whispered urgently. "The one Derek kicked out." Derek's face went pale. His confident smirk disappeared in an instant, replaced by a look of confusion and growing dread. Patricia stood at the head of the table, her hands clasped in front of her. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept much. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming on short notice. I need to introduce someone very important." She gestured to the young man beside her. "This is David Chen, the son of our founder, James Chen. As of yesterday morning, David became the sole owner of Henderson Luxury Motors and all our subsidiary locations." You could have heard a pin drop. Derek looked like he might be sick. His face had gone from pale to slightly green. David stepped forward, buttoning his suit jacket. His expression was calm, professional, but there was something in his eyes that made people shift uncomfortably in their seats. "Thank you, Patricia. I appreciate you all being here." His voice was steady, measured. "I arrived yesterday afternoon hoping to quietly observe how the dealership operates on a normal day. I wanted to see the business my father built through fresh eyes without everyone being on their best behavior because the owner was watching." He paused, letting that sink in. Several people exchanged worried glances. "What I experienced yesterday was deeply troubling," David continued. "I walked into the showroom dressed casually after a long flight. I was interested in one of our vehicles. I asked questions that showed I had knowledge about cars. I identified myself as someone working in the automotive industry, and I was treated with suspicion, dismissiveness, and ultimately asked to leave the premises." Derek tried to speak. "Mr. Chen, I can explain." David held up his hand and Derek went silent. "I don't want explanations right now. What concerns me isn't just what happened to me. It's what I realize must have been happening to other customers. How many people have walked through those doors and been judged by their appearance? How many legitimate buyers have we turned away because they didn't look wealthy enough?" He walked slowly around the table, making eye contact with different staff members. Some met his gaze, others looked down at the table. "My father built this business on a simple principle. Treat every single person with respect. He started with nothing. He faced doors slammed in his face, people who wouldn't give him a chance because of how he looked or where he came from. When he finally opened his first small lot, he promised himself that nobody would ever feel that way at his business. Patricia spoke up, her voice shaking slightly. "David, I need to say this in front of everyone. I've been managing this dealership for 20 years. What happened yesterday was my responsibility. I should have created a culture where something like that would never occur. I failed, and I'm deeply sorry." David nodded slowly. "We'll discuss your role privately, Patricia. But right now, I want everyone in this room to understand something. What happened yesterday wasn't an isolated incident. It revealed something deeper about how we've been operating, and that change is starting today." He pulled out a tablet and tapped the screen. "Over the past 12 hours, I've been reviewing files. Customer complaints, satisfaction surveys, security footage. Derek, your sales numbers are impressive, but they tell only part of the story. I found 17 formal complaints about your behavior in the past 2 years alone. Customers who felt judged, dismissed, or steered away from vehicles they were genuinely interested in." Derek's face was now bright red. "Those complaints were from people who weren't serious buyers. That's exactly the problem," David interrupted, his voice sharp for the first time. "You decided who was serious and who wasn't based on your assumptions. And the pattern in these complaints is clear. You targeted specific types of people: young buyers, people dressed casually, people of certain backgrounds." He looked directly at Derek. "That's not just bad customer service. That's discrimination." The room was absolutely silent now. Even the air conditioning seemed too loud. "Effective immediately, Derek, your employment here is terminated," David said firmly. "Mr. Howard will meet with you after this meeting to discuss the details. Please collect your personal items and leave the premises by noon." Derek stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You can't do this. Do you know who my clients are? The connections I have? You'll lose half your fleet sales. Then we'll lose them," David said calmly. "But we won't compromise our values for convenience. My father didn't build this business by taking shortcuts or looking the other way when things were wrong." Derek stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The remaining staff sat in stunned silence. David took a deep breath. "I know this is uncomfortable. Change always is. But I'm not here to punish everyone. I'm here to rebuild what we've lost. Over the next week, I'll be meeting with each of you individually. I want to hear your experiences, your observations about our culture, and your ideas for how we can do better." He looked around the room at the worried faces. "Some of you probably witnessed problems and felt powerless to speak up. I understand that. But silence allows bad behavior to continue. Going forward, everyone here will be responsible for maintaining the standards my father established. And those standards are simple. Treat every human being who walks through our doors with dignity and respect." Patricia stood again. "I've accepted a change in my role. David is bringing in new leadership. I'll be transitioning to a different position where I can help implement the changes we need. I made mistakes and I'm facing consequences. But I'm grateful for the chance to help make things right." David closed his tablet. "I know you all have questions and concerns. We'll address them in the individual meetings. For now, let's get back to work. And remember, every customer matters. Every single one." As people filed out of the conference room, the atmosphere was heavy. Some looked relieved, others anxious. But everyone understood that Henderson Luxury Motors would never be the same again. The old way of doing things had just ended and something new was beginning. David spent the next 7 days practically living at the dealership. He arrived before anyone else and left long after the last employee went home. His temporary office was a small room in the back that used to be storage space, now filled with file boxes, a laptop, and a coffee maker that worked overtime. The deeper he dug into the records, the worse things looked. It wasn't just Derek. The problem was bigger than one bad salesman. On Tuesday afternoon, David sat across from Patricia in his cramped office. She looked exhausted with dark circles under her eyes. Between them on the desk sat 3 thick folders filled with printed emails, complaint forms, and sales reports. "I should have seen this coming," Patricia said quietly, staring at the papers. "I've been going through my own files all weekend. There are patterns I ignored because I was too focused on monthly numbers." David leaned back in his chair, rubbing his tired eyes. "Walk me through it. I need to understand how this happened." Patricia opened the first folder. Derek's sales were always at the top. Every month, every quarter. When corporate looked at our numbers, he made us shine. So when complaints came in, I talked to him, gave him warnings, but I never really pushed. I told myself he was just intense, focused on closing deals. But these complaints aren't about being intense, David said, pulling out a specific page. Listen to this one from 8 months ago. The salesman took one look at me and my husband and told us we should try the used car lot down the street. We're both doctors. We had pre-approved financing for $75,000. He didn't even ask. He just assumed. Patricia winced. I remember that one. I called them personally, apologized, offered them a discount if they came back. They never did. And this one, David continued, flipping pages. Young woman, 26 years old, inherited money from her grandmother. Came in wearing jeans and wanted to see our luxury SUVs. Derek told her those vehicles were for families with established credit. She had a credit score of 790. I know, Patricia whispered. I know, I have no excuse. Derek's brother-in-law manages the fleet accounts for 3 major corporations. Together they bring in almost $2 million a year in sales. I was afraid if I fired Derek, we'd lose those accounts. So I kept making excuses. David closed the folder and looked directly at her. My father used to say that when you compromise your values for money, you lose both eventually. Those fleet accounts aren't worth what we've become. Patricia nodded, tears forming in her eyes. Your father was a better person than I am. He would have never let it get this far. Maybe, David said, his voice softening slightly. But he also believed in second chances. That's why I'm not firing you, Patricia. I'm giving you an opportunity to help fix this. But it means admitting how deep the problem goes. Over the next few days, David conducted individual meetings with every single employee. Some meetings lasted 20 minutes, others went for more than an hour. He heard stories that made him angry and stories that gave him hope. Kevin, a salesman in his early 30s, came in looking nervous. He sat on the edge of his chair, fidgeting with his phone. Mr. Chen, I want to be honest with you. I saw what Derek did to you. I thought about saying something, but I didn't. I'm not proud of that. Why didn't you? David asked, genuinely curious. Kevin took a deep breath. I'm the newest guy on the sales team. I've only been here 10 months. Derek basically runs that floor. Everyone knows it. The few times I saw someone question him, he made their lives miserable. He'd steal their leads, talk badly about them to Patricia, make them look bad in team meetings. I have a wife and a baby at home. I couldn't afford to lose this job. David made notes on his laptop. Did you ever witness Derek treating customers differently based on how they looked? Yeah, Kevin admitted. More times than I can count. He'd see someone walk in, and he'd make a judgment in like 5 seconds. If they weren't dressed right or driving the right car when they pulled up, he wouldn't waste his time. Sometimes he'd even warn the rest of us away from them, saying they were tire kickers or just looking for attention. Did anyone else follow his lead? David asked. Kevin hesitated, then nodded slowly. Brandon and Chris, 2 other guys on the team. They basically became Derek's crew. They'd joke about it in the break room, rating customers who came in, making bets on whether people could actually afford anything. David felt his jaw tighten. Thank you for being honest. That couldn't have been easy. The meeting with Brandon went very differently. He was defensive from the start, insisting that knowing how to qualify customers quickly was just good sales technique. We can't spend an hour with everyone who walks in, he argued. Some people are just browsing. It's not discrimination, it's efficiency. And how do you decide who's browsing and who's serious? David asked calmly. Brandon shrugged. Experience. You can tell by how they're dressed, what questions they ask, their body language. It's not an exact science, but you develop instincts. Those instincts are costing us customers, David said. And more importantly, they're hurting people. Creating an environment where someone's bank account gets judged before their humanity. By Friday afternoon, David had a complete picture. Derek and 2 others were already gone, but the problems went deeper than 3 people. The entire sales culture had become toxic. Competition between salespeople was encouraged to the point of sabotage. Customer satisfaction was secondary to monthly targets. And underneath it all was a casual acceptance that some customers just weren't worth the effort. David called Patricia into his office one more time. We need to let Chris go too. His meeting made it clear he doesn't see any problem with how things have been running. He's not going to change. Patricia nodded sadly. I agree. What about Brandon? Brandon's on thin ice, David said. but I think he can learn if he's willing. He's young, and he seems more influenced by the environment than naturally biased. We'll see. So we're down 4 salespeople, Patricia calculated. That's going to hurt in the short term. I'd rather have 5 good people than 10 who drive customers away, David replied. He pulled up a document on his laptop. I've been working on something. A complete overhaul of how we operate. New training requirements, new evaluation metrics, new commission structure. I want to share it with you before I present it to the full staff. Patricia leaned forward to read the screen, and her eyes widened. This is comprehensive. You're changing everything. Not everything, David corrected. I'm bringing us back to what my father intended. He built this place on respect and integrity. Somewhere along the way, we forgot that. Now we're going to remember. He scrolled through the document showing Patricia page after page of new policies, mandatory training on unconscious bias, mystery shoppers from diverse backgrounds, customer satisfaction weighted equally with sales numbers and performance reviews, a community advisory board to keep them accountable. This is going to be expensive, Patricia said quietly, and difficult. Some people won't like it. David looked at the portrait of his father visible through the office window hanging in the showroom. My father didn't build something great by taking the easy path. He did it by refusing to compromise on what mattered. That's the legacy I'm protecting. And if people don't like it, they're welcome to work somewhere else. Patricia met his eyes and saw the same determination she'd recognized in James Chen decades ago. Okay, she said firmly. Let's do this right. Let's fix what I let break. David saved the document and stood up. Monday morning, we start the transformation. This isn't just about firing a few bad employees. This is about rebuilding a culture, and it's going to take all of us working together. As Patricia left his office, David sat alone for a moment in the quiet. The hard part was done. Now came the harder part, proving that doing business with integrity could still be profitable, that treating people right wasn't just morally correct, it was good business. His father had proven it once. Now it was David's turn to prove it again. Monday morning came with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. David stood in front of the entire staff again, but this time the energy in the room felt different. Derek and 2 others were gone. Everyone knew things were changing. The question was how much. Good morning, David began, pulling up a presentation on the large screen behind him. The title read simply, The Henderson Standard. He clicked to the next slide, which showed a photo of his father from 30 years ago, standing in front of a tiny car lot with just 5 vehicles. This is where it all started, David said. My father grew up poor. Really poor. He worked as a mechanic for years, saving every dollar he could. When he finally had enough to buy his first lot, every bank in town turned him down for a loan. They looked at him and saw someone who didn't fit their idea of a successful businessman. The room was quiet, everyone listening. David clicked to the next slide, showing his father shaking hands with a customer, both of them smiling. When he finally opened this place, he made a promise. He said every single person who walked through his door would feel welcome. Rich or poor, young or old, no matter what they looked like or how they dressed, because he remembered what it felt like to be dismissed, to be judged before anyone even knew his name. Kevin, the young salesman who'd been honest in his meeting, nodded slowly from his seat. David moved to the next slide. So here's what's changing starting today. First, everyone participates in training. And I don't mean a boring video you half-watch while checking your phone. We're bringing in real experts who will help us understand our own biases and how they affect our decisions. Brandon shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Jennifer from financing looked interested. Second, David continued, and we're changing how we measure success. Sales numbers still matter, of course. But from now on, customer satisfaction scores count for 50% of your performance review. If you sell 10 cars but every customer leaves feeling disrespected, that's not success. That's failure, he clicked again. Third, we're implementing a mystery shopper program. People from all different backgrounds, dressed in different ways at different income levels, will visit our dealership regularly. You won't know who they are or when they're coming. How you treat them will directly affect your job here. Tom raised his hand nervously. Mr. Chen, what if we make an honest mistake? What if we're just having a bad day? David smiled slightly. We're all human, Tom. Nobody expects perfection. What we expect is effort and respect. If you treat every customer with basic courtesy and professionalism, you'll be fine. This isn't about setting traps. It's about accountability. The presentation continued. New commission structures that rewarded building long-term customer relationships, not just quick sales. a scholarship program for young people interested in automotive careers, community partnerships with local organizations, a customer advisory board that would meet quarterly to provide honest feedback. I know some of you are thinking this sounds expensive, David said. And you're right, it is. But my father proved something important. When you treat people right, they come back. They tell their friends. They become your best advertising. Doing the right thing is also good business. Over the next few weeks, the changes rolled out. The training sessions were uncomfortable at first. A consultant named Dr. Reeves came in and made everyone participate in exercises that forced them to confront their assumptions. She showed videos of the same actor dressed differently approaching salespeople, and the difference in treatment was shocking even to those who'd witnessed it before. Brandon struggled the most. During one exercise, Dr. Reeves asked him to explain his approach to qualifying customers, and when he heard himself saying the words out loud, he stopped mid-sentence. "I sound like Derek," he said quietly. I never realized I was doing the same thing. The mystery shoppers started arriving in the second week. The first one was a young woman in workout clothes who said she'd just finished a gym session. She wanted to see their most expensive SUV. Kevin helped her, treating her exactly like he would anyone else, answering all her questions patiently. 2 days later, David called him into the office to share the glowing report. Kevin actually got emotional. "I've never gotten feedback like this," he said. "Usually it's just about how many cars I sold, but not everyone passed." Brandon failed his first mystery shop. The customer was an older man in casual clothes who asked about luxury sedans. Brandon spent less than 10 minutes with him before suggesting he might want to start with something more practical and work his way up. When David showed him the report, Brandon looked devastated. "I thought I was getting better," he said, staring at the paper. "I really did." David leaned forward. "The question is, do you want to get better? Because this is your warning, Brandon. One more report like this and we're done. But if you're willing to really change, to really examine why you made those assumptions, I'll work with you." Brandon nodded slowly. "I want to try. I need this job, but more than that, I don't want to be that person anymore." 3 staff members quit during the first month. They said the new policies were too restrictive and made it impossible to do their jobs efficiently. David didn't try to convince them to stay. As he told Patricia, "They're showing us exactly who they are. We should believe them." But something unexpected started happening. The staff who remained began to thrive. Without the toxic competition that Derek had fostered, people started helping each other. Kevin and Tom began working as a team, covering for each other during breaks and sharing tips about customers. Jennifer created a new financing presentation that was clearer and less intimidating for first-time buyers. And the customer feedback started changing. Comments on their website went from a mix of glowing and terrible to consistently positive. One review especially caught David's attention. "I came in expecting the usual luxury car dealership experience where they judge you before you even speak. Instead, a young salesman named Kevin treated me like I mattered. He listened to what I needed, didn't push me toward the most expensive option, and actually seemed to care about helping me make the right choice. I bought a car that day, but more than that, I felt respected." David printed that review and posted it in the break room. Underneath it, he wrote, "This is what we're building. This is the Henderson standard." Patricia came into his office one afternoon in the middle of the second month. She was smiling, something David hadn't seen much lately. "I have to show you something," she said, pulling up the sales reports on her tablet. "I thought you'd want to see this." David looked at the numbers and felt his eyes widen. "We're up 15% from this time last year?" 17% actually, Patricia corrected. "And look at the repeat customer rate. It's the highest it's been in 5 years. People are coming back, David. And they're bringing their friends and family." David sat back in his chair, letting out a long breath. "I won't lie, I was worried. I knew it was the right thing to do, but I wasn't sure if the numbers would support it." Patricia smiled. "Your father used to say something I never fully understood until now. He said, you can't fake caring about people. They feel it in everything you do and they respond to it." I thought he was being naive. Turns out he was just smarter than the rest of us. That evening, David stood alone in the empty showroom, looking up at his father's portrait. The building was quiet, just the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of cars on the highway. He thought about the man in the photo, about all the obstacles he'd faced and overcome, about the business he'd built on principles that seemed old-fashioned to some people. "We're getting there, Dad," David said quietly to the portrait. "It's not perfect yet, but we're getting there. The dealership you built, the one that treated everyone with dignity, it's coming back. I promise you that." He locked up and headed to his car, already thinking about tomorrow. There was still work to do, still changes to make, still people to train. But for the first time since he'd walked into this place and been thrown out, David felt something like hope. 6 months had passed since David took over the dealership. The changes had settled in, becoming part of the daily routine rather than something new and uncomfortable. The showroom looked the same on the outside, but everything about how it operated had transformed. On a Tuesday afternoon in early spring, an elderly man walked through the front doors. He moved slowly, leaning heavily on a wooden cane. His clothes were worn but clean, the kind of outfit someone might wear for yard work or a trip to the grocery store. His hands showed years of hard labor, weathered and rough. 3 salespeople noticed him at the same time. Kevin got to him first, a genuine smile on his face. "Good afternoon, sir. Welcome to Henderson Motors. I'm Kevin. How can I help you today?" The old man looked surprised, almost suspicious. "You're actually talking to me?" Kevin's smile didn't waver. "Of course. Are you looking for something specific, or would you like to browse a bit?" "I'm looking," the man said carefully, "but I'm not sure I'm in the right place. This is one of those fancy dealerships." "Well, we do have some fancy cars," Kevin said with a laugh, "but we also have customers from all walks of life. What matters is finding the right vehicle for your needs. What are you interested in?" The old man seemed to relax slightly. "My grandson says I need something safer than my old truck. Something with all those new features, the cameras and sensors and such. I don't know much about all that technology." "Then let's find you something that makes sense," Kevin said. "How about we start by talking about how you use your vehicle? That'll help us narrow down what features you actually need versus what's just fancy extras." For the next hour, Kevin walked the man through several options, explaining everything in simple terms, never rushing, never making him feel foolish for asking questions. Tom joined them partway through, and together they created a pressure-free environment where the old man could take his time making a decision. Finally, the man said, "I appreciate all your help, but I need to be honest. I'm not buying today. I need to talk to my grandson first, and I want to check out a few other places before I decide." "That's absolutely fine," Kevin said, handing him a business card. "You should look around. This is a big decision. If you have questions later or want to come back for another look, just ask for me. No pressure." The old man took the card, studying it for a moment. Then he looked up at Kevin with watery eyes. "Can I ask you something? Why are you being so nice to me? Other places I went, they took one look and basically told me I was wasting their time." Kevin's expression became serious. "Because that's not how we do things here. Our owner's father built this place on a simple idea. Every person deserves respect. And our current owner, Mr. Chen, he's made sure we never forget that." The old man nodded slowly. "Mr. Chen, you said? Is he here?" "I think he's in his office," Kevin replied. "Would you like to meet him?" "If he has a minute, I'd appreciate that." Kevin walked the man back to David's office and knocked on the door. David looked up from his computer, saw them, and immediately stood. "Please come in. I'm David Chen." The old man shook his hand with a firm grip. "My name is Robert Miller. I was your father's first customer." David froze. "You're Robert Miller? My father talked about you. He said you gave him a chance when nobody else would." Robert's eyes filled with tears. 43 years ago, I walked into your father's tiny little lot. I was working construction, saving up for a truck. Every other dealership in town had turned me away or treated me like garbage. Your father spent 3 hours with me. 3 hours for a used pickup truck sale that probably didn't make him much money, but he treated me like I was buying a Rolls Royce. David gestured for Robert to sit, pulling up a chair beside him rather than staying behind his desk. "He told me that story when I was young. He said you taught him that being kind costs nothing and returns everything. I read about what happened to you," Robert said quietly. "How you came in here and got kicked out of your own dealership. How you cleaned house and changed everything. I had to come see for myself if it was true. If James Chen's spirit was really back in this place." "And?" David asked softly. Robert smiled, wiping his eyes. "That young man, Kevin, out there, he treated me exactly like your father treated me 43 years ago. Like I mattered. Like my time was valuable. Like my decision was important even though I told him I wasn't buying today. He paused, his voice shaking. You brought your father's dream back to life. The two men talked for over an hour. Robert shared stories about the early days, about James Chen's struggles and triumphs, about the principles he'd stood for even when it cost him business. Your father used to say something that stuck with me my whole life, Robert said. He said, success isn't measured by what you sell. It's measured by how many people felt seen. David felt his throat tighten. He said the same thing to me when I was 12 years old. I never forgot it. Before Robert left, David asked if he would be willing to speak at the dealership's upcoming annual meeting. The staff needs to hear these stories. They need to understand the foundation this business was built on. Robert agreed, and 2 weeks later, he stood before the entire Henderson Motors team. His stories about James Chen brought many people to tears. He talked about discrimination and dignity, about second chances and first impressions, about how one person's kindness had changed his life. That truck I bought from James Chen, Robert said, his voice echoing in the quiet room. I drove it for 18 years, and every time someone asked me where I got it, I told them about the man who treated me like family. I sent him dozens of customers over the years. But more than that, I never forgot how he made me feel. And that changed how I treated other people. After Robert finished speaking, David stood up. This is why we do what we do. It's not just about selling cars. It's about treating human beings with dignity. My father understood that. And now we all need to carry that forward. By the end of the year, Henderson Luxury Motors had become something special. Sales were up 32%. Customer satisfaction scores had reached all-time highs. More importantly, the culture had completely transformed. The staff took pride in their work, not just because of their paychecks, but because they were part of something meaningful. Local news picked up the story, and David reluctantly agreed to interviews. He used the platform to talk about systemic problems in retail, about unconscious bias, about the importance of building businesses on values rather than just profits. Other dealerships started reaching out, asking for advice. David began consulting with automotive groups across the country, sharing what he'd learned. He established the James Chen Foundation, providing loans and mentorship to entrepreneurs who faced the same barriers his father had overcome. Patricia thrived in her new role, working directly with customers and training new hires. She often reflected on her mistakes, using them as teaching moments. I learned the hard way, she would tell new employees, that looking the other way is its own form of discrimination. Silence protects the wrong people. One evening, David stood in the empty showroom looking at his father's portrait. Below it now hung a brass plaque with his father's quote, "Success isn't measured by what you sell. It's measured by how many people felt seen." His phone buzzed. It was a text from Kevin. "Just got a message from Mr. Miller. He's buying that SUV we showed him. Says he wants to buy it from us because we made him feel like family." David smiled, typing back a reply. Then he looked up at his father's portrait one more time. "We did it, Dad," he said quietly. "They tried to destroy what you built, but we brought it back. And this time, we're making sure it stays." The showroom lights reflected off the polished cars, casting shadows that danced across the floor. Outside, the city moved on, thousands of people going about their lives. And inside Henderson Luxury Motors, a business built on dignity and respect continued its father's legacy, one customer at a time, proving that doing the right thing wasn't just morally correct. It was the best business decision anyone could make. David locked the doors and walked to his car, already thinking about tomorrow. There would always be more work to do, more people to train, more customers to serve. But now he knew with certainty that his father's dream wasn't just alive, it was thriving, and that made everything worthwhile.